It's been a minute. Hi. Hello. Top 35 albums of 2024. Hang on, this is kind of cramped. Can I move this? Wait. There we go. All right. Just so you could read the title card. Hello. It's been a minute. I stopped recording the album quest reviews because I got tired of it. But now I'm here, and there's my friend's cat, Mac. Awesome. We're going to get straight into it. I'm going to try to keep this brief because I don't want to be here for an hour. I might be here for like 40 minutes. We'll see. I've got notes written on this note card to help speed the process along. Don't forget, in the description, I'll have linked an album of the year list for all of this stuff if you just want to read it. I'm also going to have a favorite songs of 2024. I'm going to have worst music. I'm going to have some other stuff like that coming in the future, so stay tuned. And, you know, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Let me check my notes here. Our first album on the list, number 35. Oh, I forgot. I'm going to give an honorable mention. This is Interference Pattern by Elucid. I would have included it on my top list this year, but I had already finalized the list when this came out. This was released on December 29th. And I had already finished the list by then. So, you know, honorable mention. I'm going to put it on. I'm going to give it a chance to be on the list for next year. We'll see how that goes. For the real number 35, we have Bright Future by Adrian Lenker. This album, let me read from my notes. This is a really heartfelt record. The instrumentals are sparse, meaning those songs where they swell and come to the forefront really stick out. The lyrics are very well written, with vivid pictures being painted throughout of all sorts of emotions, positive and negative, though mostly sadness. In its sparseness, it gets a little dull, but there are some tracks that really make it all worth it. And, you know, I think if singer-songwriter is more of your style, you're really gonna like this, especially that first opening song is just really good. Probably the most emotionally impactful on the album. I don't really revisit it all the time because I don't like just straight sad stuff, but there is some stuff that's going to be worth your time if you're interested in this kind of album and you haven't checked it out already. Now we're going on to number 34. We have Coyote, You're My Star by Dana and Alden. I believe these are two brothers. Let me read my notes. Incredible opening 3 songs, great first half, decent second half. If the album was as good as the first 3-track run, it would be an absolute masterpiece. It's got some of the most delicious, lush jazz tones while keeping it grooving and light. It doesn't dwell on any one idea for too long, and, at least in the first half, spends most of its time on its best moments. There are sound influences from all over the place here, from Japanese jazz fusion reminiscent of Jiro Inagaki to Italian psychedelia in the 70s, and even some more daring genre-bending choices like dub later on. After Ice Cream Song, it dips in quality and sort of meanders near the end, but the first half makes up for it, certainly. I think if you're going to check any song out, I just noticed that in the cover art, there's a wolf. Let me see if I can point it out, like, up at the top right corner. Wait. Yeah, that way. I just noticed that there's a wolf. Or I guess that's a coyote. I didn't see that before. I was too focused on the two guys being just so into their instruments. But yeah, I think if you're going to check any of the songs out from here, let it be You Can Do Anything. That's a really good one. And, you know, if that kind of like jazz pop, jazz fusion sounds are interesting to you, yeah, this will be worth a watch. Or worth a listen. This isn't a movie. Can you tell that I don't script my videos? Next up, number 33, we've got MG Ultra by Machine Girl. I am not super familiar with this genre, but I did like it. Let me read my notes. This is what I imagine the soundtrack of a futuristic racing game sounds like. There are parts where the grindiness cuts out in favor of more grooves, and it's awesome every time it does. I've really not been well versed in this genre before, but what's on display here makes me want to start. The fact that this is a live drummer's performance makes it even more impressive. Yeah, it's a lot of digital hardcore, breakcore, hardcore breaks, however you define that genre, with a live drummer. That's really cool. And if you like the really high energy stuff, you'll find something to appreciate. I don't come back to it often, again, because I'm not super... I don't like the so much, but when I do listen to it, it's pretty good, and I come back to a couple of the songs. Next up, number 32, we've got Scrapyard by Quadeca. And if these are allegedly the outtakes for another album, we may be in store for one hell of an album. It's highly experimental, and very few of the songs sounds like you might think at the first glance. In that place of trying new things, Quadeca has the ability to play around with flows and deliveries, boasting insecurity, obsession, and desperation are all conveyed perfectly well. There isn't an exact sound it has, per se, but it does have a very unique identity. There's a lot to like. I think if you like the experimental sounds of hip-hop, if you can excuse a little bit of the poor mixing and like how far back the vocals sound sometimes, and really let the weirdness take its hold, there's a lot to love. I cannot say that, it is 32 on my list. I don't think it's bad. I think it's worth checking out. Next up, we've got number 31, Songs of a Lost World by The Cure. Is ridiculous to be able to make an album this good 50 years into your career. Let me read my notes. Consistent and atmospheric, made better by each song taking its time. You're able to get to know each idea before they move on to the next, and each one of them sounds like an awesome conclusion to something grand. It doesn't have the most standard construction, instead doing its own thing, as if to say that it can't be stopped. And hey, I wasn't going to try anyway. I remember my first time listening to it, I was like, I feel like I'm in like a JRPG or like a Souls-like, and I'm going through the final leg of a dungeon about to face the final boss. And hey, that's a good sound, it's really carried well throughout each, the songs are like 5, 6, 7 minutes. The final one is 10 minutes. And sometimes the singer doesn't even come on until like 3 minutes in, like halfway, and you really don't even need him. But then when he gets added in, it's like an extra boost of like, ooh, that's good, a lot to like, especially if you're emo. Next up, we've got number 30, Angel Interview by Meaningful Stone. It's floaty, drenched in reverb, and it's emotionally charged. This album stands as one of the best shoegaze efforts this year. The beginning of the album is incredible, with all the best songs right at the front, and a healthy mix of others throughout the rest of the runtime. Some are more dialed back, some are more full, and it ends totally like you wouldn't expect. Lots of great highlights here. I think, if shoegaze is your thing and you haven't checked this out already, do that. I cannot stress enough, especially that first couple songs are just, ooh. Sometimes I would just like sit there and be like, God damn, You could really tell when I wrote things down and when I didn't. But hey, we're just experiencing the joy of, enjoying music together. Next up, we got number 29, Why Loud by... I thought there was a mouse cursor stuck there. I got scared. By No Worries, which is the duo effort between Anderson .Paak and Knowledge, if you didn't know. So smooth, I tried to grab hold of the groove and my hand slipped right off. There's a bunch of Dilla influence that combines with a summer sound to make one of the moodiest smooth soul and neo soul albums I've heard in recent times. Anderson .Paak's vocals float right on top of the mellow production and give it just a twinge of spice and really sells the whole experience. I could do without a lot of the shorter songs, since many of them don't stick around long enough to get in the groove and don't offer anything new, but the highlights are high right here. This would be a great album to put on at a cookout or on a walk down the beach, and hey, I might just schedule something just to do that. And that's all I've got to say about that one. Next up, we got number 28, Theo by Luke DeCiccio. I think that's how you pronounce that name. I really should have looked it up beforehand. But, we ball. This one actually got recommended to me by Mr. Luke himself. And, I'm glad he did. Let me read what I wrote. It's hard to pull off minimalist singer-songwriter and make it this good. On nearly every track, all that's featured is a guitar and a voice, and through just those two instruments, both raw emotion and extended metaphor deliver some of the most touching songs I've heard this year. It's easy to let the music take over, lulling you into a state where only the instrumental matters, but paying attention to the songwriting makes it clear how vulnerable this album is, expressing fear and contempt and excitement and love and everything in between, separated by song and intertwined by common theme. I gotta, once again, praise this album for its songwriting. I believe it was written during and shortly after the birth of his first child, who was featured on the cover art, and that kind of emotionally vulnerable state has a lot of potential to be this grand thing. And, it is. It's really, it offers itself up a lot to be dug into. There's a lot to appreciate and kind of unearth, both emotionally and lyrically. I think this one is also worth checking out. Next up, number 27, Shadowbox by Mavi. This is the greatest production on a hip-hop record for 2024. The drumless, sample-based style complements Mavi's loose, emotional raps well. It's the kind of thing that MF Doom fans would enjoy. The middle of the album is the best, with an incredible run of tracks that boost each other up into a package greater than the sum of its parts. And, I'll be listening to my playlist, and I have a bunch of these songs from this album on here. It's only like 30 minutes, and I get into it, and I'm like, oh, right, I forgot how good this album was. I just want to go play it again, And again, that middle run is just crazy stuff. Oh, he's asleep. I cannot, if you're a fan of, abstract, drumless hip-hop, like stuff that Alchemist does, MF Doom, even Billy Woods, this is definitely going to be up your alley. Next up, Snow as a Metaphor for Death by Centuries. I forgot to mention, this is where the year of the really long album title begins, because you're going to see a lot of those, some of which make me do a little line break in the PowerPoint that I made. Let me read what I wrote. Noisy, but not without purpose. Through the screaming, both in the vocals and the lead guitar, many questions are asked. What does it mean to move on? Who deserves to live? What does it feel like to die? Even if it doesn't have the answers, it has enough going on in each track to echo an answer. It knows just when to pump the brakes and turn the noise down to let you rest, only to get right back to the ear-splitting goodness. With the best closing track of the year, it's hard not to revisit this album again and again. I've really been, in the last, month and a half-ish that I've been revisiting everything from this year, I've come back to this one the most. I listened to it at the beginning of the year, forgot about it for a little bit, came back to it, and wow, I'm going to keep listening to it for a while. It's got a lot to love, and I hope Centuries, I believe it's just one guy, so I really hope that he's able to bring the heat with the next one as well. Very excited for that. All right, next up we got number 25, Flower of the Soul by Liana Flores. Beautifully played, softly spoken, and powerful, despite its understated style. By combining bossa nova with folk and a focus on the acoustic guitar and vocals, we get a raw performance that doesn't stop being beautiful. It's the kind of music I would expect to listen to as I walked through an enchanted forest with fairies and other mystical creatures floating around. It's got so much charm and such an enchanting atmosphere that it's impossible to turn away. Really, the highlight of this album, to me, is the vocal performance. Once again, just floating above everything else and really giving it this quality like I am witnessing some magic right now. And it's true. It is a magical album. I really recommend it to people who like that kind of sound. Next up, number 24, You Only Die Once by Freddie Gibbs. I love this cover art. It's crazy. Like, the thing in the... it's cool. Let me read what I wrote. One of the most consistent albums of the year, topped off by an introspective look into Freddie's state of mind. The production is smooth and packed with infectious grooves throughout, even if it's a departure from the more sparse, sample-based style some might be expecting. Sharp lyrics and interesting flows are the cherry on top. And I kind of thought that Freddie Gibbs was mostly like a producer collab guy. He's got all that stuff with Madlib, he's got that stuff with The Alchemist, and I got so used to hearing him on top of like really sample focused drumless more abstract stuff, especially like Alfredo or Montana, or not Montana. What's the other one? You know what I'm talking about. It's interesting. It's pretty. It's a pretty nice change of pace to hear this difference in style. There's a lot more contemporary instrumentals. It is a shame though that they took one of the best songs off of Spotify because they couldn't get the sample cleared. It's it makes me want to go back to listen to it a little less, but you know what? When I did get to listen to it, it was really worth it. Maybe they got it up on YouTube somewhere. All right, next up, number 23, No Hands by Joey Valence and Bray. This is perhaps the most fun I've had with an album this year, period. Even without the short interludes at the ends of songs showing the duo laughing as they try to record, you can tell that they're having a great time making it, and that energy is infectious. When it first came out, I thought it was a little too derivative, but with time I've realized that wearing their influences on their sleeves has made it a lot easier to connect with the music. They take inspiration from lots of older hip-hop acts and styles, from Beastie Boys to DJ Easy Rock, and some of the late 2000s club bangers to make something familiar enough to easily warm up to, but distinct enough to make it memorable. It also helps that the opening 3-track run is incredible, and really helps set the stage for what's to come throughout. Not to mention they brought Aisha Erotica out of retirement. Hey, just for that I'm looking forward to what this duo does next. Like, I recommend if you're going to listen to this one, what I would do is I would get in my car, and it's got like terrible speakers that are blown out. I would turn the bass up, and it was just, and like, that's really just the way to experience this. It's kind of, somebody when it came out called it like the return of recession pop, and I'm welcoming it, honestly. It's a lot of fun. A lot of dance energy, a lot of bass. It's great stuff. Next up, we've got Orquídeas by Caliuchis. Swapping between the Latin and R&B influences on this record does Caliuchis a lot of favors, especially in the way she's able to let her voice do a lot of the work. Her singing complements all kinds of backing instrumentals, including orchestral arrangements, garage-style electronic, Latin pop, and more. It's like a potpourri. Each track is something new and fun to get into. And really, every time I return to a Caliuchis project, I just remember how awesome her voice is. She really just helps keep everything together. Maybe this album isn't as focused as some of her other ones, like from 2023, but what we have is still just a lot of great stuff. If you for some reason haven't gotten into a lot of the Latin sounds or like reggaeton or anything like that, this might be a good place to start because it's got some fun stuff just to kind of ease you in and then really turns it up at the end of the album. Next up, we are entering the top 21. Let me take a drink of water, because I'm thirsty. Spilled some on myself. Charm by Clairo. I believe that's Clairo. Is it Clairo? I don't remember. The softest rock album in a long time. Even if each note, each drum hit, and each whisper in the vocals is understated, the weight behind each one still shines through. It's the kind of thing I imagine would be awesome to listen to on a cold autumn day watching the leaves on trees turn different colors. A feel-good album with lots to come back to. Especially, I think this album is going to turn into a treasure trove of sampling. I've already seen a couple examples on YouTube where people have picked up parts of this song to rearrange in their own ways and just have, it's open enough to be able to be interpreted like that. And, also, even if you don't listen to it that way, if you just listen to it straight through, there's still a lot to love. It's got more upbeat songs, it's got understated and slow songs about romance and about struggle and all that kind of stuff. Really just awesome all around. Next up, number 20, Perceive Its Beauty, Acknowledge Its Grace by Shabaka. I did not expect to like this album as much as I do. Not at all. Let me read you what I wrote. I've tried New Age in the past and sometimes liked it, but this takes the cake as my favorite of the genre so far. The rhythms added to some of the tracks, as well as the occasional vocals provided by the features, break it up to be less monotonous, which is usually my problem with the genre. Some of the tones reached in the background as the flutes take the stage are rich and full of energy, and they come together with the ideas presented through what little words are shared to make for something thought-provoking without being heavy-handed. It's light and graceful. And especially having different featured artists allows a lot of them to really shine on top of these flute-heavy instrumentals, especially Elucid, who I mentioned earlier, gets on there and starts rapping, and he's already an abstract guy, but it just works. There's something about the quality of having these two styles collide that aren't normally found together that really enriches the album and makes it just that much better. I really recommend it if that sounds interesting. Next up, number 19, Absolute Elsewhere by Blood Incantation. Surprisingly accessible metal album, all things considered. The vocals are just guttural and howly enough to add a certain feeling like an ancient Norseman we resurrected is singing it, without it sounding like it was added as a requirement of the genre. The instrumentals are great here as well, and played with a lot of skill. Some songs, especially Tablet 2, sound like mashups, culminating in the final track, which blows the rest of them out of the water. I like the sprinkling of less intense space rock sections in it as well. They're a good way to break up the pacing without getting super boring, which is often my biggest problem with metal records. Really solid, and something I could recommend to non-metalheads like myself. Unfortunately, both of the Tablet 2 songs end up sounding more like overlong interludes between Tablets 1 and 3, but they don't detract too much from the experience. I think this is probably a good introduction point for into metal for a lot of people. It's got a little bit of the conventions where, like, oh, we can't be, it's like 6 songs and they're all like 5 plus. One of them is 13 minutes, and they're called like The Message Tablet 1 and stuff like that. It's got a little bit of that goofiness that a lot of metal albums have while taking themselves really seriously, but it doesn't really detract from it, in my opinion. I think it works to kind of let you fill in the gaps of what kind of story you would like to be told in this album. Next up, number 18, Kaleidoscope by Turquoise Death, which has my favorite album cover of the year. This art is fucking phenomenal. And, like, it's such a dynamic pose, and, like, even if I don't know what's going on, it goes hard. This is a phone wallpaper right here. Anyway, my notes. Highly atmospheric experience, and for once, an album that has an amen break in it that didn't take me right out of it. Historically, I don't listen to a lot of drum and bass. I find a lot of the genre to be too harsh on the ears, but focusing on the atmosphere of each track and the layering of instruments definitely helps. The first half of this album is absolutely nuts, and is just one track of another of incredible stuff that flows together really well. It lost me a little bit in the middle, but the end was just experimental enough to keep it fresh and enjoyable still. The biggest problem, though, is that it's only as great as the sum of its parts. If it were arranged a little differently, and if each track flowed into each other better instead of front-loading the album, it would be much better. Still, though, with songs this good, it's undeniable that this album is great. And that's all I've really got to say about that. I will shout out that one song near the end where it's like not even drum and bass for the first 5 minutes. It's just like acoustic guitar, and then the drums kick in, and it's just mind-blowing. Anyway, number 17, Chromocopia by Tyler, the Creator, which I have been looking forward to. I've been really excited for his next album since Call Me If You Get Lost. And here's what I wrote about it. This is Tyler at his most confident in his entire discography, compared to the last 3 he's released, especially with Igor showing him holding back his singing voice after trying and failing to get other artists to sing for him, and Call Me If You Get Lost, which was meant to prove to the world that he was still a competent rapper. Chromocopia stands out as an unrestrained creative behemoth, featuring parts of the music that would have been reserved in other works. It shines through every word and helps lend a sense of legitimacy to something more experimental. The production has a lot of fun ideas that are executed well, with tracks of all kinds, from piano ballads to synth-heavy bangers and rap anthems. They all have that signature Tyler flair to them as well, which helps keep the album's identity. Really, The instrumental choices are the most fun the album has to offer. If it were a bit more focused, it would have placed higher, but as it is, there's still a lot to love. I remember my second biggest problem with this album is that he lied. Like, during the rollout, Tyler was like, no features. None. And then there were features. I was like, oh god, Sexy Red jump scare, hello? And, this really is another album on top of all the stuff that Kendrick has been doing recently that is solidifying West Coast hip-hop as the up-and-coming, most popular sound in hip-hop in the mainstream. We'll see how that pans out. It's really gonna... he even mentions it on one of the songs. We'll see how that goes. Number 16, no title as of 13th of February 2024, 28,340 dead by Godspeed You Black Emperor. This album, the concept is, what would it be like to be in Gaza right now? And it manages to sound... It manages to put you right into that position, and just the crushing emotional weight of everything. I would have a lot more to say if it hasn't already been said. I'm going to be putting a link in the description for a GoFundMe if you would like to put some money towards Palestinians currently under siege. That's all I've really got to say, because this is kind of an album about a serious topic, and I don't want to be disrespectful. Next up, number 15, Fearless Movement by Kamasi Washington. I've got an extended metaphor here, so bear with me as I explain it. This album reminds me of a breezy summer day. In some ways, at some times, it's perfect. It's just what you needed. Sometimes you walk out and the wind hits you just right and cools the sweat of the sun off your skin and feels like heaven. Other times, it's groggy, humid, and smells like rain. What I mean to say is that this album has a core identity, but it lacks focus. It has chosen to spread out in all directions and cover the town rather than moving in a straight line to get up into the hills and the forest where the cool summer day is really needed. It was great around 7 p.m. as the sun started to set, but now the whole town is warm and a little groggy and too humid to go out in without sweating up a storm. And I know that sounds like a really negative paragraph to put at number 15, but that's just kind of a snippet of the review that I wrote. Basically, what I mean to say is, the longest songs need to be shorter, and the shortest songs need to be longer. I'm kind of in that weird minority, at least from the discourse that I've seen, where a lot of my favorite songs are the low down, less super, high up in your face jazz, like spiritual jazz stuff. I like the really low groovy stuff. There's a lot of interesting fusion here. He's got Andre 3000 on there playing the flute. He's got people rapping on there. A lot of long songs, a lot to like. It's just a little too long, in my opinion. But it's still good enough to be number 15. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot to like. Now we're getting into the top 14. I don't think this is halfway. No, this is more than halfway. But 14 is my special number, so I'm going to say it specifically. With Ultra 85 by Logic. With the goofy shit at a minimum, production at its peak, and the lyricism sharp as ever, Logic delivers with this album. It's a bit bloated. Some of the tracks could have been dropped and skits separated from the songs, but it's at least consistently good. There are no points where it lags despite the size. There's some decent commentary as well, with new ideas and topics familiar to Logic's songs weaved together nicely. My biggest problem is just that it's pretty easy to tell that the lines for the skits were recorded separately from one another in different studios and not edited together to sound like they weren't, especially in the beginning skits. If it was trimmed down a bit and the skits were mixed together better, this might be Logic's best album. And it has some of his best songs, that's for sure. Especially like the opener, and like a lot of the stuff near the end. There's got some pretty cool features on there, but even the songs where it's just him, he's really bringing the heat this time. He's not slacking. He's not, kind of doing it half-assed. He is here to show you that he is still good at what he's doing. Right now we're coming up out of the reverse bell curve of his discography, where in the middle it was really the worst, and now we're coming up and we're getting some of the greatest. Hopefully he keeps up this trend into the next couple of years. Number 13, here's where the long titles really show themselves. The Pilgrim, Their God, and the King of My Decrepit Mountain by Toir. And, you know, let me read what I wrote. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. This album, somehow the group's debut, has the lush soundscapes and musical imagery of a band well-versed and matured in the folk musical stylings. Each song brings with it a new piece of the world that slowly begins to be put together as the album progresses, from the lyrics to the instrumentals to the very structure of the album itself. Its roots are stuck deep into the earth, and it begs you to explore them, feeling along the bumps and twists. Each song adds something new to the experience, while building on the previous songs at the same time. It's truly a wonderful experience, one that I was obsessed with when it first came out early 2024. I was listening to this thing like 3 or 4 times a week, maybe even 5. I was showing it to everybody. I was trying to get everybody on it. I'm really glad that it stayed this high up on my list. You know, it's a good one. It's a good one. I'm a Toir fan now. I'm looking forward to the rest of their stuff. All right, and then we got number 12, What Now by Brittany Howard. Love me some soul music. From the word go, you're presented first with a strange new age type opening and immediately are shot straight into orbit with some crazy soul and funk music right out of the golden age in the mid-70s. Between most of these songs are these haunting little outros with wind chimes that add a little mystique to this project and segue one song into the next without losing the fire. It does start to lose the momentum it had during track 9, which I think was a little too long, but the final tracks are absolute bangers. With a beautiful voice, rising instrumentals, and funk that'll make you move, there's a lot to dig in here. And, you know, similar to a lot of the other songs, or a lot of the other albums on this list, this one's got some sweet experimentation with different genres here, too. Like, there's a house song, there's like some of the stuff in the beginning has like ballads, and then it's got like all kinds of different emotions going on. I really liked this one, and you know, you should check it out. You should check it out. Number 11, Dauntless Manifesto by Cupcake, which is perhaps the strangest album that I've put this high up on the list. Let me read what I wrote. After holding back on us for such a long time, Cupcake delivers her best album yet, filled to the brim with songs that don't sacrifice their hard-hitting nature for the comedy. There's an exploration of styles here too, with Chicago drill, Brazilian funk, and hardcore hip-hop coexisting in such a way to keep it diverse and really let her do her own thing on top of each one. Lots to love, both for Cupcake fans and for those that might not have taken her music seriously before. You know, I will revisit songs on this album, be like, oh man, this album is good, I should listen to the whole thing, find new songs to appreciate, listen to those ones, and then be like, oh man, I should go back. Like, I wish every Cupcake album sounded like this now. It's really just something to behold. I think that a lot of people might not give her the credit that she deserves because she's seen as like, oh, she wrote Deep Throat, she wrote CPR, right? But here she manages to have those kinds of songs without giving up on having anything serious or fun, you know, including the first and last song, which are, you know, 2 of her best, really, just period. And, you know, I really hope that this album gets people to start appreciating her music more. Next up, we've got number 10, the big 1-0. This is Sky 100 by Paran. The end of the logical progression of every song sounding like an epic crescendo. It's an album that frequently left me awestruck, hardly able to appreciate the scale of it all on a first listen. Each song is constructed beautifully, with great progressions and fun twists on each formula to keep it shaking up and avoid falling into monotony. Awesome stuff. My main complaint is the mixing is so loud. I remember when it first came out, I had to listen to it on Bandcamp because it wasn't on Spotify yet, and I literally had to put the volume on minimum, and it was still too loud. But, you know, that's shoegaze. I do really appreciate having a lot of longer songs on these kinds of albums, especially because it gives the artists to a lot of room to maneuver and try different things. And here it works especially well, especially in the middle. I think Paran has a problem where a lot of the ending of his albums kind of fall off, but this one, it was pretty good. It was pretty good. And, I'm going to come back to it much more later down the line. Next up, we got number 9, Where the Butterflies Go in the Rain. Oh, I forgot to put the artist's name. This is by Rina. Whoops. Anyway, it's been a long time since I've heard a neo-soul album this smooth, this lush, and with so much character behind it. Rina's voice is beautiful and soft-sung, sounding like a cloud as she drifts along, taking all sorts of shapes. In her soft words, she paints a vivid picture of each song's topic, from love to family to a warm summer day. It's a perfect summer album for hot beach trips and spending a day with someone you love. And, I really just am such a fan of this kind of music, I really hope that she finds the success that she deserves, because there is so much to love here. I keep coming back and being like, I'll put it on and I just kind of melt away. It's one of those albums where you just let it wash over you, and it feels great. Next up, number 8, the opposite of that, You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To by Knocked Loose. Even if I may not be the biggest fan of metalcore, something about Knocked Loose keeps me hooked in a way that a lot of others in the genre just can't. It's intensely angry, every word shouted at the top of the singer's lungs. The guitars and the mammoth-sounding drums help to sell the emotions, swelling up and petering out akin to a heartbeat. Across less than 30 minutes, its pulse carries throughout and is excellent for pushing through something with good variety to boot. Like, I would, throughout this year, if ever I needed to just lock in on something, like if I'm doing a lot of physical labor at work, or like, oh, we've got 30% more work to do, I'm putting this on and I'm just going. If you got to work out, this will be good. If you got to go running, this will be good. And even if you're just looking for something if you're looking for some kind of metal stuff to switch up with, this is also good. I really recommend it. Next, we're getting into the top 7. These are my very special albums from this year, the ones that I liked the most. Next, and the first one to start the top 7, Mahash Masana by Father John Misty. It's an album about beginnings, old, new, and brand new. It combines chamber orchestras with saxophones and guitars and rock drums and power noise at some point, and yet this combination of sounds is never grating. It swells soar above the rest, and the homely sounding voice of Father John Misty has everything sound down to earth despite the 1,000 things going on around him. And not to mention, it should be critical. It should be criminal to open an album this well. The opening song on this album is worth the entire listen. And again, with these long songs, you might come to find that I'm a long song enjoyer. With these longer songs, you get a lot more time to really appreciate all of the small things, and the way that each of these progressions and the way that the songs are made and how these tiny little changes can switch things up and keep it from being boring. This is really a masterclass in making a song not get boring by just slightly tweaking some things here and there and really letting the emotions take hold. I'm going to take a drink of water. Oh, I got water on my notes. Number 6. I Lay Down My Life For You by JPEGMAFIA. This is his most approachable album in a long time. The samples continue to get more avant-garde, including blaring rock and roll, Brazil funk, a Fortnite dance move, and more. It manages to be gritty and grimy while having beautiful moments with string orchestration and heartfelt, low-down songs. Sonically, it's fascinating to go through, even if not much is said. I've maintained this opinion that JPEGMAFIA doesn't rap about anything. I need him to pick a topic. But his production more than makes up for it. Every time a new song comes on, it's something new, it's something different. the first time I listened to it, I was like, you can do this with sampling? And he just continues to blow a lot of producers in the game out of the water at the current moment. Next, number 5, the big one. Lineker, Kaju by Lineker. Spoiler. The strongest thing Kaju has going for it is Lineker's voice. Beautiful and buttery smooth, but that doesn't mean anything else is compromised. From beautiful strings to deep bass grooves and high-energy dance songs, this album has a little bit of everything, and it's all held together by its passionate vocals. Everyone can find something to love about this album, whether it's an individual song or a run of tracks or even the whole thing. A must for any fans of modern R&B and soul, fitting so many ideas together that it could push the genre into new territory, and solidifies Lineker as a person to watch in the next few years. And really, this album has, even though it comes from popular Brazilian music, it has so many influences that it pulls from in different places that wherever you're from, you could listen to it. It's not kind of a local sound. It's not really something that you have to know about. You don't have to know about this kind of thing to get into it. It is just really good. It's really good. And, I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there who are learning because of her to appreciate their voice. And really, that's even better than any of the music can be. Next up, number 4, the big 4. I spoiled this one earlier by accident. Oops. The New Sound by Jordy Greep. The easiest way I can describe this album is that it sounds like if Frank Zappa made a Masayoshi TAKAnaka album with a bunch of Brazilian musicians. It may sound daunting at first, and the first track doesn't help with that, but it's very much worth the effort to get into. The exploration of Latin rock sounds to make an album all about men who can't find love leads to this weird juxtaposition of happy-sounding instrumentals with disgusting lyrics delivered in a jarring way. And despite it all, it works. There are plenty of songs here that are fun to listen to and comedic in the right circumstances, neither of which sacrifice the other to attain listenability. It may dip a little bit in the middle, but each bookend of the album is so good that it makes up for it. And really, sometimes I'll revisit this album and I'll remember one of the lyrics and I'll be like, oh my god, he says that? And then forget immediately because we had some sweeping horns and the guitarist is doing something crazy and we've got a chorus in the background. He's taken his roots in this avant-garde prog rock music and mellowed it out a little bit to be more friendly with this Latin influence, but damn if it doesn't work. Number 3. Magdalena Bay's Imaginal Disc. I don't know why I'm starting to do the artist name first instead of the album name. Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay. Even with a slow start, Imaginal Disc manages to keep its momentum throughout. It isn't concerned with sending a message or reveling in its own grandeur, and instead is the most danceable thing to come out in recent memory, with driving synths and creative progressions that keep each song evolving around themselves, never becoming boring. On repeat listens, though, you learn that you have been tricked all along. Magdalena Bay managed to pack a narrative into a seamless dance album, if you look close enough. Even though it may not be earth-shattering or revolutionary to synth pop, it works with those formulas so well that it doesn't need to. It's easily the best of the more accessible records from 2024. And really, just the best way I can describe the listening experience is I played it. I started it and I was like, oh, is this really y'all's album of the year? And then I got to track 4 and I was like, oh, I get it now. And I literally just could not stop moving my hips for the rest of the 40 minutes that this album was. Just absolutely incredible stuff. I had it on repeat pretty much all summer. And, this has really solidified the duo as just great musicians. I hope they manage to keep it up in their next effort. Number 2, which I had at number 1 for a long time until number 1 came along. This is A Lonely Sinner by Sam LRC. What an album. Although its storytelling may not be as straightforward as lyrical as others on the list, A Lonely Sinner manages to use soundscapes to tell its story. It's not often that an album can find a way to use ambient sections to compel things forward rather than slow them down, but this proves that it's possible. The guitar sections are epic, with sweeping chords that feel like they fill the whole room with sound, only to hang on that moment for just the right amount of time. It's simultaneously soft-spoken and in-your-face, and even without needing to hear the words, has a satisfying arc to itself, both in story and in sound. And this album was so good, I listened to it for the first time, and there was a point where I just had to put my head on my hands on my head like this, and just look, and just, watch like this, and be blown away. Absolutely incredible, especially because she plays all of the instruments on this, except for the samples. But, you don't even notice that they're samples. It's mind-blowing how good this is, especially because one person made it. Really, this is like a masterclass in pacing, is really the thing that I can give it the most props for. It knows exactly how long to hang on each moment, and when to let the curves of a storyline go up and down and up and down and up and down. And I just cannot thank it enough for what it did. This album was so good, I gave myself a concussion to it earlier this year, headbanging so hard. It was crazy. But there's one that overtakes it for the best of 2024. It's a similar album. You might know it, you might not. Monarch of Monsters by Violet Pony, someone that I had no idea what they might sound like, someone who I had no intention of checking out because I'm not an EDM fan. But this one is hard noise rock with some crazy stuff going on. Let me remember to read my notes. What Violet Pony achieves on Monarch of Monsters is nothing short of incredible. Though the story told throughout might feature fictional characters and stemmed from a fever dream, it might as well be real. The raw emotional weight carried by each song doubles as a gateway into real struggles with mental health, and a compelling story where no part is lesser than the rest. It's loud, it's noisy, sounds get throaty and heavy, and it mixes heavy noise rock with electronic elements so well that sometimes you don't notice. It's a phenomenal experience that only gets better with each listen. And, much similar to A Lonely Sinner, like I mentioned before, there were points on this album, multiple points, where I just had to sit there and be dumbstruck at how crazy good this was. Just absolutely obliterating my eardrums. There was nothing left after. I couldn't listen to any other album afterwards because I was like, damn, it was so good, I can't top it. It's constructed very strangely. It's got some pretty normal stuff going into it. It's got, some acoustic rock sections, some pop-sounding sections, some electronic stuff. And then, near the middle, it gets ridiculous. There's one of those songs, I don't know how she manages. She plays all the instruments on this as well. Absolutely nuts. And there's one song where she manages to make it sound like a guitar is hyperventilating. How did she do it? And then the song right after that is a 22-minute behemoth of a track that is not, it doesn't even get boring. And then it's more stuff after that too. Oh my god, it's so good. I cannot recommend this to everybody because it is heavy. I cannot lie. It is heavy. It is sometimes hard to listen to. But if you can put aside the time, if you can really get that emotional energy ready, this will be worth your time. This is absolutely a sleeper pick. It's going to be on my top albums of the decade for 2020, the 2020s list. I just know it. And, shout outs to Violet Pony. That was my top 35 albums of 2024. Let me show you. There we go. Thanks for watch. Yeah, thanks for watching. I know I haven't really been posting much this year, but maybe that'll change. I've got some stuff planned. We'll maybe get a New Year's resolution video out too. Until then, though. Hi, buddy. I woke him up. Thanks for watching. Don't forget, tell me in the comments what your top albums are. Let me know your thoughts. I'm always curious to see what others think. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.